Mama Mensa was at the window when the first vehicle turned into the road. She saw it before anyone else in the house. She had been watching, not for this, but because watching was a habit she had built over 40 years of managing a household where every arrival mattered. She saw the lead vehicle and recognized immediately the kind of vehicle it was. Not the model, the category. The particular weight of an official convoy in motion communicated something about the person inside it that the model of the vehicle only confirmed. She counted. 4 vehicles. 5. Then 2 more. She looked at the lead vehicle's insignia and the color of the escort, and something that was not quite panic and not quite shame arrived behind her ribs and settled there before she had named it. She thought, this cannot be coming here. The convoy turned into their compound. Stay with me. Because what happened in the 6 months between the evening Amara Ose sat in this family's sitting room and answered questions about her father that she could not fully answer yet, and the morning a convoy pulled into the Mensa compound for a woman they had decided to discard, is not simply a story about a family that was wrong. It is a story about the particular kind of pride that cannot see what it is looking at until it is too late to look away. Like this video. Subscribe to African Tales by Charlie if you are new here. Turn on notifications. Because I have not yet told you about the letter Amara carried in her bag the day she walked into that family meeting. The letter her dying mother left her, sealed, that told her the name she had never been given. And I have not yet told you what Chief Kwame Asante said when his convoy stopped at the Mensa gate. Amara Ose grew up knowing 2 things about her father. That he was gone, and that her mother did not discuss him. This was not said with bitterness. It was said with the particular finality of someone who has made a decision so completely that revisiting it is simply not available. Her mother, Abina Ose, was a woman of contained, disciplined energy, the kind of woman who took whatever she had and made more of it than anyone expected. She sewed. She sold. She saved with a precision that had no room for waste. She raised Amara in a 2-room flat with a roof that leaked in 2 places and a landlord who was perpetually one conversation away from being replaced. She sent Amara to school in pressed uniforms that she ironed herself every morning before she left for the market. Abina Ose was not a woman who spoke about herself. This was not reserve. She was not reserved. She was direct and opinionated and had the particular confidence of someone who has spent years proving that she requires no external validation. But she considered the narration of her own life to be less useful than its conduct. What she wanted Amara to understand about her she communicated through action, and what she communicated through action over 23 years was this. A person who knows what they are worth does not negotiate the worth, they simply occupy it. She ironed Amara's school uniforms every morning before she left for the market. Not pressed them into passable condition. Ironed them with the precision of someone for whom the standard was the standard and not something to be adjusted downward when circumstances permitted. Amara understood, understanding this only as an adult, that the uniforms were a communication from her mother to the world. This child comes from something. It does not matter what the something has or does not have. Comes from something. She taught Amara to keep accounts at 13. Not as a skill, as a philosophy. Every shilling that came in was noted. Every shilling that went out was noted with its category and its justification. At the end of each month, they sat at the kitchen table together and reviewed the month's accounts. Her mother said, "If you understand where your money went, you understand where your life went. If you cannot account for it, someone else is deciding for you." Amara still kept accounts the same way, in the same category structure her mother had taught her. The format had never seemed worth changing. On the last night she spent at the hospital, 3 weeks before her mother died, when Amara was still managing the hope that 3 weeks provides, her mother called her to lean close and said, "I need you to know something." Amara said, "Anything." Her mother said, "I was afraid sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. I want you to know that because I never showed you the fear and I do not want you to think I didn't feel it." She said, "I showed you the work. The work was real. But behind the work there was sometimes something that was not as certain as the work looked." Amara said, "I know, Mum." Her mother said, "You couldn't have known. I didn't let you know." She said, "I know because I have felt the same thing. And I learned to do what you did. Keep working." Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That is exactly right." She never spoke about Amara's father as a grievance. She spoke about him the way she spoke about other things that were finished, with a clean, declarative absence. He is not here. We don't need what is not here. We build with what we have. Amara built. She was good at school in the way that children of determined mothers often are, not because they are naturally exceptional, but because the message they receive from infancy is that effort is the only available variable and they had better maximize it. She studied accounts. She got a job at a mid-sized logistics company. She was promoted twice in 4 years. She lived modestly, not from scarcity now, but from habit, and from a relationship with money that her mother had calibrated carefully. Money is a tool, not an identity. What Amara built in the years after school was the kind of career that accumulates without fanfare. She did not network strategically or position herself for visibility. She worked with the particular, complete attention of someone who had been taught that the standard was the thing and not the perception of the standard. At the logistics company, where she was the youngest person in the accounts department when she started and the most senior non-director within 4 years, her colleagues described her in the particular terms that competent women earn when they operate without performance. She was reliable, they said. She had a way of seeing where the number was wrong before the analysis was complete. She never took credit for other people's work, and she never allowed her work to be credited elsewhere. She lived in a flat she had furnished herself over 3 years, slowly as she could afford each piece, not as a deprivation project, but as a demonstration to herself that she could build something with her own hands that was genuinely hers. The landlord, who had initially been doubtful about her age when she came to view the flat, had called her twice in 4 years to ask if she knew anyone else looking for a place, because she was the kind of tenant that landlords wanted duplicated. She dressed the way her mother had dressed her. Correctly, for the occasion, without excess. She saved with the same precision her mother had, a percentage of every payment, without negotiation with herself about exceptions. She went to 3 countries for work. She never went on a holiday that was not also a work trip, partly because she had not yet needed the kind of rest that holidays address, and partly because the idea of spending money on pure rest felt like an indulgence she had not yet earned. Kofi told her, once, that she was the most self-possessed person he had ever met. She said, "My mother spent 23 years making sure I had no reason to depend on anyone else." He said, "Does that include me?" She said, "You are not dependency. You are addition." He looked at her for a moment. He said, "That is the most Amara sentence I have ever heard." She met Kofi Mensah at an industry conference where she was presenting the company's supply chain efficiency metrics, and he was in the audience on behalf of Mensah Group's logistics division. He came up after the presentation and said, "Your assumptions section is the most honest I have seen in a conference presentation in 3 years. Most people hide the assumptions." She said, "Hiding the assumptions is how you get comfortable with inaccurate conclusions." He said, "Exactly." They had coffee. They argued about inventory forecasting models for 40 minutes. He called her the following week. Kofi Mensah was, by the measures his family used, an excellent product of an excellent family. He was educated well, managed the Mensah Group's logistics division competently at 28, and had the particular ease of manner that comes from growing up in environments where confidence is the baseline rather than the achievement. He was not arrogant. Arrogance requires a comparison that he did not need to make, because his position had never been in question. What was less expected in a man from his background was his specific allergy to performance. He found managed conversation exhausting. He found social occasions where everyone was representing something, their family, their position, their aspirations, to be the most draining environment he regularly occupied. When he was honest with himself, which was often, he acknowledged that the Mensah Group's social world, the events, the partnerships, the careful maintenance of the right relationships, was the part of his life he found most difficult to inhabit completely. Meeting Amara at the conference was the relief of encountering someone who was not performing anything. When she said that hiding assumptions produces comfortable inaccuracy, she was not trying to impress him. She was simply saying what she believed because she believed it, and a conference room full of people did not change what she believed. He spent his entire life watching people adjust what they said based on who was listening. She did not do this. It was the most interesting thing he had seen in years. He told his best friend, the week after he called her, "I think I found someone who says what she thinks." His friend said, "That is either a relief or a problem." Kofi said, "I think it is both." He smiled when he said it. He loved her with the specific, grounded quality of someone who knows exactly what they have found and who has the self-awareness to understand what that means about what they were missing before. They dated for 8 months before he told his family. He did not tell them sooner because he knew his mother and he knew what would happen, and he was not in a hurry to have what would happen be a part of what he and Amara were building together. He told them eventually because the alternative, a secret indefinitely maintained, was not something he was willing to do to Amara or to himself. He told his mother on a Sunday. Mama Mensa said, "Bring her to meet us." He heard the particular quality in her voice that meant she had already decided and would be assessing rather than meeting. He told Amara, "My family wants to meet you." She said, "Of course." She was not afraid. She did not perform the absence of fear. She genuinely had it, because she had nothing to hide and nothing to manage, and she had learned from her mother that people who are worth your respect will show you so, and people who are not can be acknowledged and moved past. She did not know what she was walking into. Mama Mensa had built the family's social position the way she built most things. Methodically, with attention to detail and no tolerance for inaccuracy. She came from a good family herself, not the wealthiest but respected, and she married into the Mensa family at 24 with a clear understanding of what the marriage required and the specific skills she would need to perform her side of it. She had performed her side for 40 years without drama and without shortfall. She was not a woman who disliked people. She was a woman who organized people into categories that corresponded to her understanding of the social architecture, and who operated within those categories with the consistency of someone who believes that the architecture is real and important rather than invented and negotiable. In her world, a marriage was not a private arrangement between two people. It was a public statement about where a family stood and where it intended to go. The people her son married would sit at her table for the rest of her life. They would appear in photographs at events. Their family would be the family her grandchildren came from. These were not small matters. Amara Osei did not fit the category. It was not personal. Mama Mensa did not dislike her. She was, as she told Kofi, a good girl. She was direct and competent and clearly intelligent. But intelligence and competence were table stakes. What Mama Mensa looked for in a family member was a specific alignment of background and position and trajectory that she could see and verify in place. Amara had no verifiable father. She had no family name that could be placed. She came from a market woman and a seamstress, which was not an insult. It was simply the record, and the record did not produce the category Mama Mensa required. What she had not accounted for, in her 40 years of organizing people into categories, was the possibility that a category could be wrong. Not misapplied, structurally wrong. That the architecture itself was a way of seeing that produced certain kinds of blindness. She would understand this eventually. It would not be a comfortable understanding. She would arrive at it slowly, through accumulation, through the specific evidence of watching a woman she had dismissed continue to be more in every room than anyone Mama Mensa had ever categorized as the right kind of person. She would revise. Eventually, the welcome ceremony at the Mensa family compound was attended by 11 family members, including 2 aunties who had been specifically invited. Amara understood this only later, when she understood that the meeting had been curated. The house was significant, not ostentatious, which would have been easier to read, but quality in the particular way of wealth that has been present for long enough that it has stopped needing to announce itself. Everything was correct. The seating arrangement placed Amara across from Mama Mensa with no buffer and no ally. Kofi sat to her side, present, but in the position of an observer in his own family's setting. The questions began with the ones that are always asked. Where are you from? Who is your family? What do your parents do? Amara answered, I am from this city. My mother was a market woman and a seamstress. She passed 2 years ago. There was a quality in the room when she said this that was not quite sympathy and not quite dismissal, but something that lived between the two and was more uncomfortable than either. Then Mama Mensa said, And your father's people? Where are they from? Amara said, I did not grow up knowing my father. My mother raised me on her own. The room rearranged itself around this information in a way that was entirely visible and not acknowledged. One of the aunties said, There is no family on that side? Amara said, Not that I was connected to growing up. The auntie looked at Mama Mensa. Mama Mensa's expression did not change, which was its own communication. Amara noted the seating also. She had noticed it from the moment she sat down. Kofi was positioned slightly away from her, not deliberately perhaps, but the effect was the same. She faced the family without his proximity as a buffer. The two aunties she had not been told about watched her with the particular quality of people who have been briefed in advance on what they are looking at. The first auntie, a tall woman with the posture of someone accustomed to authority, returned to the subject of her mother. She said, "So she was a seamstress, your mother?" "Among other things," Amara said. The woman said, "What other things?" Amara said, "She sold at the market. She sewed for other families. She managed her household finances with the precision I have tried to apply to my professional work." The auntie smiled with the lower portion of her face and looked at the second auntie. The second auntie said, "Your mother raised you alone. That must have been difficult." Amara said, "For her, perhaps. I did not know any different." There was a pause in which the auntie searched for the next approach and did not immediately find one, and Amara sat in the pause without filling it. A skill she had, and one which communicated to anyone paying attention that she was not as unaware of the subtext as she appeared. What she did not say, what she was still carrying sealed, was the envelope in her bag. She had brought it that morning the way she sometimes carried things that mattered to her. Not to use, simply to have present. The ceremony continued. Food was served. The conversation moved to safer topics. At the end of it, Amara shook hands with everyone and said she was glad to have met them. Mama Mensa said, "We will be in touch." Kofi drove Amara home. He was quiet. She held his hand and did not ask about the quiet because she could feel what was inside it, and she was not ready to name it yet. He went home to his family. That evening, Mama Mensa called her son into the sitting room and told him what she had decided. She said it precisely and without cruelty, which was her way. She had never been cruel, she was simply certain. She said, "This girl is a good girl, but she has no family. We don't know her people. There is no one on her father's side who will stand with this family. In our world, a marriage is not just between two people. It is between two families. And a family that cannot be seen, cannot be counted." She said, "I cannot support this." The 2 days were, Kofi would understand later, a failure of nerve that he would spend a long time paying for in the currency of his relationship. He called Amara every evening, as he always did. He said, "How was your day?" She said, "Fine." He said, "I am tired." She said, "Rest well." She did not know yet. He knew she did not know yet. He was using her not knowing yet as a space in which to do his thinking, and this was, he understood it in his body even before he understood it in his mind, the wrong use of her not knowing. He sat with his mother's assessment for 2 days not because he agreed with it but because he could not find the language to disagree with it in a way that would matter. His mother was not cruel. His mother was, by her own reasoning, correct. The logic she had presented, a marriage is between two families, a family that cannot be seen cannot be counted, was the logic he had been raised with. It was embedded in every decision the Mensa family had made for 3 generations. He could see it was insufficient. He could not yet see it was wrong. He drove past Amara's building once, on the evening of the first day, without stopping. He sat outside in his car for 20 minutes looking at the light in her window. He thought about what it meant that a woman who had built everything she was from nothing, from a 2-room flat and a determined mother and her own hands, could be dismissed for the manner in which she had built it. He thought about the conference presentation and the way she said it. Hiding the assumptions is how you get comfortable with inaccurate conclusions. He thought, my mother is hiding an assumption. He did not stop the car. He drove home. On the second evening he called his closest friend and said, "My family won't support the marriage." His friend said, "What are you going to do?" Kofi said, "I don't know yet." His friend said, "You just haven't decided to act on it." Kofi said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "I know." On the third day he sat across from her at her kitchen table and told her. This was, she would tell him later, the thing she was least able to forgive. Not the delay but the 2 days during which he protected his own process at the cost of her being able to begin hers. His family would not support the marriage. He needed time to think. He was not calling it off, he was not ending the engagement, but he could not move forward without his family's support and he did not know yet how to resolve that. Amara looked at him across the table for a long moment. She said, "I understand." She said, "Take the time." She said it without performance, which was the most devastating version of those words. He left. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time after he was gone. Then she went to her bedroom and opened the drawer beside her bed and took out the envelope. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been dismissed by someone who did not know who they were looking at? Tell me what that felt like. Like this video. Subscribe to African Tales by Charlie. Because I have not yet told you what was inside the envelope. And I have not yet told you the phone call she made that evening. The one that brought the convoy. The envelope had been given to her by her mother's lawyer 14 months ago. 3 weeks after the funeral. Her mother had prepared it years before she fell ill. Not out of morbidity, but out of the particular forward-thinking practicality that had organized every part of her life. The envelope was sealed with a handwritten note on the front. For Amara. When you are ready. She carried it for 14 months without opening it. She opened it the night Kofi told her his family would not support the marriage. The letter was 4 pages in her mother's handwriting. Careful, deliberate handwriting. The handwriting of a woman who had not had the luxury of being careless with words. Her mother wrote about Kwame. She wrote about meeting him when she was 22. A man who was already becoming who he would become, already possessed of the particular certainty that would one day make him significant and that, in the early years, simply made him difficult to be beside. She wrote about loving him. She wrote about leaving him, not because he was cruel, but because she could see, with the clear eyes of someone who knew herself, that the life he was building required a kind of woman who was willing to be part of a picture, and she was not that woman. She took nothing from him when she left. He offered. She said no. She wrote about the years after. Not as struggle, she was precise about this. She wrote, "I want you to understand that I was not surviving. I was living. The distinction matters. Surviving is what you do when there is no other option. Living is what you do when you have decided what your life is for and you are doing it. The flat was small and the work was hard, and there were evenings when I was tired in a way that I could not explain to anyone. But it was mine. Everything I built was mine. Everything I gave you came from me directly, unmediated by someone else's money or someone else's name. I do not know if that was the right choice for you. I know it was the right choice for me." She wrote about what she observed in Amara as she grew. The specific quality of her attention. The way she held her ground without aggression, which was her mother's quality but her own version of it. She wrote, "You learned everything I tried to teach you, and then you did something I did not anticipate, which was improve it. You are more patient than I was at your age. I do not know where that came from. It is a better quality than what I gave you, and I am grateful for it." She wrote about Kwame reaching out. She declined because by then Amara was becoming so clearly herself, and she did not want the introduction of great wealth into that becoming to confuse who Amara was on her own terms. She wrote about meeting him when she was 22. A man who was already becoming who he would become, already possessed of the particular certainty that would one day make him significant and that, in the early years, simply made him difficult to be beside. She wrote about loving him. She wrote about leaving him, not because he was cruel, but because she could see, with the clear eyes of someone who knew herself, that the life he was building required a kind of woman who was willing to be part of a picture, and she was not that woman. She took nothing from him when she left. He offered. She said no. She wrote about the time when Amara was 12 and Kwame reached out. She declined because by then Amara was becoming so clearly herself, and she did not want the introduction of great wealth into that becoming to confuse who Amara was on her own terms. She wrote, toward the end, "I know you will wonder if I was wrong to keep you from each other. I have asked myself the same question many times. I do not have a certain answer. What I know is this: you became exactly who I hoped you would become, without any of what he has. That means you are yours first. Whatever comes next, you were yours first." She wrote at the end, in the last paragraph, "His name is Chief Kwame Asante. His offices are in the city. If you want to find him, he has been findable for 30 years. Amara read the letter 3 times. Then she sat with it in her lap for the rest of the night. She found him the following week. He was not difficult to find. Her mother was accurate about that. Chief Kwame Asante was not a man who disappeared. He ran the Asante Group, a holding company with interests in infrastructure, energy, and telecommunications that had been built over 30 years from a single civil engineering contract. He was known in the way that certain men are known, not by everyone but by everyone whose business it was to know, which in this country's commercial and political landscape was a significant number of people. She sent a message through his company's general address. It was a short message. Said, "My name is Amara Osei. My mother was Abina Osei. I believe you may be my father. If you are willing to speak with me, here is my number." He called within the hour. The first conversation lasted 40 minutes. By the end of it, she understood two things about him. He was not performing emotion, and he had been waiting for this call for 26 years. He said, "I looked for you once when you were 12. Your mother said no." He said it without accusation, simply as the record. She said, "I know." She said. She explained. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Shall we start?" They started. The first meeting in person was at his office, his choice because he understood that meeting on her territory was not something she had yet, and meeting on neutral territory would produce a performance from both of them, and the office was at least honest about whose home ground it was. She arrived exactly on time, which he noticed because he noticed everything. She shook his hand before she sat down. He looked at her hands. He looked at her face. He said, "You have your mother's eyes." She said, "People keep saying that." He said, "I said it because I am glad. I missed them." That was the moment she cried. Not before it and not during the rest of the conversation, but at that sentence. The specific, unexpected precision of a grief she had not known she was carrying, which was the grief of a father who had loved a woman she also loved and who had been kept at the same distance as her. She told him about her mother's death. He listened. He asked questions that were careful, not intrusive but genuine, the questions of someone building a picture of 26 years from the fragments available. What did she like to cook? What did she think about when she was quiet? Was she easy to make laugh? She answered all of them. He told her things about her mother that she had not known, a version of her mother at 22, before the market and the sewing and the discipline, a version that was ambitious and impatient and had, he said, an opinion about everything and the particular courage to state it directly. Amara said, "She did not lose that." He said, "I know. I could see it in you before you even opened your mouth." In the 4th month, he took her to see a project, a secondary school his foundation had built in the eastern part of the city, with a technical skills wing that trained young women in trades that had historically been closed to them. He showed her around without ceremony, introducing her only as a colleague to the people they met. On the drive back she said, "Why didn't you tell them who I was?" He said, "Because you are still deciding who you are to me. When you decide, you will tell people yourself." She looked out of the window for a moment. Then she said, "That was a good answer." He said, "I have been practicing for 26 years. She told him about Kofi in the 5th month. She told him carefully, the way she told him most things, with the complete information and without performance. He listened. He asked, "Is he good to you?" She said, "Yes." He said, "Do you love him?" She said, "Yes." He said, "Then that is what matters." He said it without qualification, which she noted and stored. A father who said yes, without conditions, to the man his daughter had chosen. 6 months of careful, incremental building. Meetings that were awkward and then less awkward, conversations that were formal and then less formal. She learned that he was methodical, that he had a specific, contained quality of attention that she recognized in herself and now understood the origin of. He learned that she was not looking for his money or his name, that she was genuinely interested in who he was as a person, and that this interest arrived without agenda. He found this, he told her later, both wonderful and difficult to trust, because a life spent in his position had made him suspicious of people who expressed interest without apparent motive. She did not tell Kofi. She was still processing what it meant to have a father. She was still learning how to have this particular father. She was not ready to introduce that complication into what she and Kofi were building. She intended to tell him. She was composing the conversation in her mind for weeks, and then his family held their welcome ceremony and Mama Mensa said what she said about no family on that side, and Kofi came to her kitchen table and asked for time. That evening she called Kwame. She did not call him to report a grievance. She called him because she was in pain and she was still learning what it felt like to have a father to call when she was in pain. She told him what had happened, the ceremony, the questions, Mama Mensa's judgment, Kofi's silence, the suspended engagement. She told it plainly, the way she told most things. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, there was a pause. He said, "Do you want me to come?" She said, "I don't know." He said, "I will come and you can decide what you want me to do when I get there." He said it the way he said most things, simply as a fact being offered. She said, "All right." He said, "I will be there in 3 days." He was there in 3 days. He did not arrive quietly. Chief Kwame Asante did not arrive anywhere quietly. Not because he performed grandeur, but because his operational reality required infrastructure. 7 vehicles. His personal security. 2 members of his executive team who traveled with him always. The convoy pulled into the Mensa family's road on a Tuesday morning, and the road, which was a good road in a good neighborhood, was briefly and entirely transformed by the quality of what was moving along it. Mama Mensa was at the window. She saw the lead vehicle. She saw the insignia. She saw the number of vehicles. She stood at the window while the convoy turned into her compound, and she understood, with the particular comprehension of a woman who had spent 40 years in this country's upper social tier, exactly whose convoy this was. She saw this man's name in newspapers. She saw his photograph beside heads of state. She had, on 2 separate occasions through intermediaries, attempted to establish a commercial connection with the Asante Group on behalf of her husband's business. She had never managed it. The convoy stopped. A door opened. Chief Kwame Asante stepped out of the lead vehicle. He was not in a suit. He was in a quality agbada, the attire of a man who is not performing formality but whose every day is already formal. He looked at the Mensa house. He looked at the compound. His expression gave away nothing except attention. His aide moved ahead. The aide went to the Mensa door and said, "Chief Kwame Asante is here to speak with the Mensa family regarding his daughter." Mama Mensa said, "Who?" The aide said, "Chief Kwame Asante. His daughter Amara Osei is engaged to your son. He is here to introduce himself." The quality of silence that followed this sentence was a specific, contained silence. Not the silence of a room that has gone quiet. The silence of a room in which an understanding is moving through every person present and arriving at the same conclusion by different routes. Mama Mensa said, "Please tell him to come in." Chief Asante sat across from the Mensa family in the same sitting room where they held the welcome ceremony. Papa Mensa sat beside his wife. Kofi stood near the wall. He was home when the convoy arrived, looked out of his window, and spent the 30 seconds between seeing the convoy and understanding whose it was in a state of suspended comprehension. Chief Asante did not perform the visit. He sat with the particular contained authority of someone who is never in a room where he is not the most significant person present and who has long since stopped needing to communicate this. He said, "I am told your family does not know who Amara's father is. I am here so that you know." Mama Mensa said, "We had no idea. The information was not available to us." He said, "The information was not offered because my daughter did not know it herself until recently, and because what she knows of herself does not require my name to be complete." He said it without heat, simply as accurate information. He said, "I want to tell you something about the woman your son has chosen, not because of who her father is, because of who her mother was. Abina Osei raised my daughter alone, without 1 shilling from me, because she would not accept money from a life she was choosing to leave. Every quality you see in Amara, the directness, the competence, the refusal to be less than what she is, came from a woman who built it from nothing." He paused. "When you said she had no family worth knowing, you were speaking about that woman's daughter. I want you to understand the full picture of what you were speaking about." Papa Mensa looked at his hands. He said something quietly to his wife that Mama Mensa did not respond to. Chief Asante looked at Kofi. He said, "Your fiancée is the most capable person I have met in a very long time. I do not say this because she is my daughter. I say it because I have spent 30 years assessing people, and I know the difference between competence that comes from resources and competence that comes from character. She has the second kind. It is rarer." He said it without dramatization, the way he said everything, as the direct transfer of accurate information. He said, "I will leave you to think about what I have said." He stood. He did not shake anyone's hand. He left the way he arrived, with the quiet, contained certainty of a man who has said what needed saying and has no interest in waiting to see how it lands. The room was quiet. Papa Mensah looked at his wife. Mama Mensah looked at her hands. Amara was not there when her father arrived. She did not come with him. He told her he was going to the Mensah family and she said, "I should come." He said, "Let me go first." She said, "This is my fight." He said, "I know it is. You can take it over at any time. Let me introduce myself first." She understood what he meant. This was not her father fighting a battle on her behalf. This was her father doing what fathers do, arriving first, establishing who he was, so that the room his daughter walked into was not the room she had walked into before. Kofi called her while his parents were still with her father. He said, "Amara, who is your father?" She said, "I was going to tell you. I am sorry that this is how you are finding out." He said, "Is this real?" She said, "Yes." He said, "I am coming to you. Don't go anywhere." She said, "I am coming to you, to your family home. I have some things to say." She arrived at the Mensah compound 20 minutes after Kofi's call. Her father's convoy was still there. She walked through the gate and the security who had been standing at the perimeter, her father's security, acknowledged her with the particular deference of people who know whose daughter they are looking at. She found her father in the Mensah sitting room across from Papa Mensah. Mama Mensah was in the chair to the left. Kofi stood near the wall, slightly apart from his parents, in the posture of someone who is trying to maintain his position between two things that are pulling in different directions. Her father looked at her when she came in. He said nothing. He made space for her beside him. She sat down. She looked at Mama Mensah. She said, "I want to say something that I did not come here to say before, and that I am saying now because the situation has changed. Not because of who my father is, because of what you said about who I am." She reached into her bag and took out the letter. It was worn at the folds from carrying. She said, "My mother wrote this before she died. She gave it to her lawyer and he gave it to me after the funeral. In it she told me who my father was and why she kept us apart. At the end she wrote, 'You are the daughter of two people who loved you completely, from opposite directions.' That is who you were speaking about when you said there was no family worth knowing on my father's side. A woman who built my entire life from scratch because she did not want me to need anyone else. And a man who waited 26 years for a phone call." She looked at Mama Mensah directly. She said, "I did not come here with my father's name. I came with my mother's spine. The name is only here now because you made it necessary." The room was quiet. Her father looked at her. Not with pride in the performed sense, with the quiet, specific recognition of someone who has just seen the person his daughter is, fully, for the first time in a single sentence. Mama Mensah looked at her hands. Papa Mensah, who had said very little for the entirety of the visit, looked at his wife and said quietly, "I think we made a mistake." Mama Mensah did not answer immediately. When she did not look at Amara. She looked at Kofi. She said, "I said what I said because I was protecting what we built." She paused. "I was protecting the wrong thing." Kofi looked at Amara. Amara looked at him. Kofi told his mother, while the convoy was still in the compound, that he came very close to making the worst decision of his life. He told her that the silence of those 2 days was the thing Amara told him she could least forgive. Not the delay, but the 2 days during which he protected his own process at the cost of her being able to begin hers. He told his mother that the next time she had an opinion about who he should marry, he expected to be told directly rather than managed. Mama Mensah received this with the specific stillness of a woman who is choosing not to respond to being corrected in front of witnesses, which was its own concession. Chief Kwame Asante said to the Mensah family, before he left, "I have missed 26 years of my daughter's life. I will not miss what comes next." He said it without threat, as information, as the fact of what was now true. He left in his convoy. The road was ordinary again once they had gone. But the Mensah compound had been altered by the morning in a way that its walls would carry for a long time. Later, in the car, Amara and Kofi sat side by side without speaking for several minutes. He was the one who spoke first. He said, "I am sorry for the 2 days. She said, I know. He said, I should have told you the moment my mother said it. I should not have processed it in private while you were living inside it without knowing. She said, you were deciding whether to choose me. She said it without anger, simply as the accurate description of what those 2 days were. He said, I had already chosen you. I was deciding whether I had the courage to act on it without my family's support. She looked at him. She said, and if the convoy had not arrived? He was quiet for a moment. He said, I would like to think I would have arrived at the same place. She said, I know. That is why we are still in this car. She said, but I need you to understand something about what those 2 days produced in me. I have spent my entire life needing no one to validate who I am. And in those 2 days I was in a situation where the validation of a family I did not choose determined the status of something I did choose. I need to know that if we build something together, you will not again put my status in someone else's hands without telling me it is happening. He said, I understand. Promise. She said, good. Now take me home. I need to call my father. Amara and Kofi did not have an easy conversation that afternoon. Easy was not what the situation earned. She told him about the 6 months, finding her father, the phone calls, the incremental building, why she had not told him. He listened. He said, I understand why you didn't. He said, I wish you had. She said, I know. I was still learning how to have a father. I did not know yet how to introduce him into a life that had always been built around his absence. He said, are we all right? She looked at him for a long moment. She said, we will be. Ask me again in a month. He said, in a month, then. The wedding took place 4 months later. It was not a small ceremony. The Mensah family, once they understood what they were part of, proceeded with the full weight of their social infrastructure. Chief Kwame Asante arrived that morning with the same convoy, which had become, in the 4 months since the Mensah family's Tuesday morning, a familiar sight at events involving his daughter. What those 4 months contained, between the Tuesday morning and the wedding day, was not a simple reconciliation but something more like the beginning of an honest reckoning. Mama Mensah did not apologize with words. She was not a woman for whom apology was a natural instrument. She apologized with behavior. She called Amara twice in those 4 months, ostensibly to discuss wedding arrangements, actually to establish a kind of contact that acknowledged the previous contact had been wrong. The calls were stiff and correct, and Amara received them with the grace of someone who understood that a proud woman using the wedding planning as a vehicle for atonement was still a proud woman attempting to atone, which was more than she had expected. Papa Mensah came to the logistics company, not announced, simply appeared at reception and asked if Amara Osei had time for a brief meeting. She came down and he said, I wanted to say, in a context that is yours and not my house, that I should have said something different that morning. He did not say what he should have said. He did not need to. She said, I appreciate that. He nodded. They shook hands. He left. It was not a dramatic moment. It was the kind of moment that is not dramatic and that matters enormously precisely because it is not. Chief Asante attended the wedding reception sitting to Amara's left. Mama Mensah attended sitting to Kofi's right. At some point during the evening the two of them were at the same table without anyone having arranged it. Amara watched this from across the room with the particular attention of someone monitoring a chemical reaction. They spoke for 11 minutes. She did not know what was said. She asked her father afterward. He said, she asked me what Abina was like when she was young. He paused. I told her. She listened carefully. Amara said, what did she say when you finished? He said, she said she understood more than she did before. Amara said, that is more than I expected. He said, I thought so too. The detail that moved through the guest list and then through the broader social network and eventually through several industry newsletters that covered such things was not the convoy or the guest list or the venue. It was what happened at the father of the bride moment. Amara's father walked her down the aisle. Before they reached the end of it he stopped. Not dramatically, not performing, and said something to her that only she could hear. She smiled the specific smile of someone who has just received exactly the right sentence at exactly the right moment. Later, when people asked her what he said, she told them. He said that her mother would have enjoyed watching Mama Mensah's face when the convoy arrived. She said it laughing. Her father, nearby, laughed also. Mama Mensa, who overheard this, did not laugh. But she did look at Amara with the specific expression of someone who has spent 4 months reconsidering a set of assumptions and who is still quietly in that process. She would complete it eventually, not dramatically, slowly, in the way that people complete the revision of an assumption they were very certain about, by accumulation, by proximity, by watching the person they dismissed continue to be exactly who they were. What she found, watching Amara over those months, was that the woman she had called nobody with no family worth knowing was the most competent person in any room she entered. Not because of her father's name, but because of everything her mother had put into her spine. She found this difficult to admit. She admitted it anyway. There is a version of this story where it is about the moment the convoy arrives and the powerful man corrects the powerful family and the wrong is righted dramatically and everyone sees. That version is true but incomplete. The complete version is this: a woman whose mother taught her that she was enough built an entire life on that teaching. She built a career and a relationship and a self that required nothing from the father she had never met. And then she found him, and then someone dismissed her for not having him, and then he arrived, not to rescue her but to stand beside her while she rescued herself. The convoy was his. The sentence was hers. Her mother wrote, "You are the daughter of 2 people who loved you completely, from opposite directions." She carried that letter into the room. She carried it out of the room. The letter is in a frame now, on the wall of the house she and Kofi share. Her mother's handwriting in the last line, the one she could not read at the funeral but can read every morning. "You became exactly who I hoped. That is everything. If the story found you today, leave a comment. Tell me about the room you walked into without knowing what you were carrying. Tell me what happened when they found out. Like this video. Share it with someone who has been told they have no family worth knowing. Subscribe to African Tales by Charlie. I will see you in the next one.